Now, Keith runs a really tight ship here, so I'm going to have to watch myself that I don't exceed my I guess I've got 10 minutes. Well, our topic is the relation between religion and science. Now, there are very many different kinds of religion, as you know. There is Buddhism, there is Christianity, there is Taoism, there is Hinduism, and so on, Judaism, Islam. There is also a kind of religion, there's something at least like a religion, as I said last night, something I'll call naturalism. That's the idea that there isn't any such person as God or anything like God. And I say naturalism, while maybe we can't say explicitly that it's religion, that might be stretching the term a bit, but I don't care to argue about these words. Naturalism, at any rate, performs many of the functions of a religion. I want to argue two theses in my 10 minutes. First, that there is superficial conflict but deep concord between Christianity and science. And I want to argue, second, that there is superficial concord but deep conflict between naturalism and science. So I say there is a religion-science conflict. It's between naturalism and science, not between Christianity and science. So first of all, the superficial conflict between Christianity and science. Let's take Christianity to be defined by the great creeds of the church, the Apostles' Creed, the Nicene Creed, the Athanasian Creed, the Heidelberg Catechism, the Belgic Confession, the Westminster Confession, add in some more if you want, and take what's common to them all, call that Christianity. Then clearly there's no conflict between Christianity and, say, physics. At least I don't see any. Clearly there's no conflict between Christianity and chemistry. You might say, well, maybe there's a conflict between Christianity and biology. But if that were so, it would presumably be because there is a conflict between Christian belief and evolution. Now, evolution has lots of different sides to it, and because Quentin will be breathing down my neck, I won't be able to explain any, I'm sorry, not Quentin, Keith will be breathing down my neck. I won't be able to explain any of that. But I'll just assert there isn't any incompatibility between Christian belief and evolution either. God could have created the world by virtue of evolutionary processes. Where there does seem to me to be a conflict is between Christian belief and a certain fast-growing part of psychology called evolutionary psychology, formerly called sociobiology. The whole aim of evolutionary psychology is to explain prominent, important human traits in terms of our evolutionary origin back there on the plains of Serengeti a million years ago. So evolutionary psychology attempts to explain, for example, the sort of behaviors that characterize men and women when they behave with respect to each other, parents and children too. But not only that, it also tries to explain such things as our love of art, our love of music, our love of stories, literature, and the like, and our religion and our morality. Attempts to explain all of these things in terms, as I say, of our evolutionary origin. Each of these things, whatever part of it we're talking about, at some point arose in some fashion and turned out to have adaptive value, enabled those people that displayed this trait or those groups that displayed this trait to survive and reproduce. So it was maintained in the race. All right. Now, some of these theories. One question is whether evolutionary psychology constitutes good science or not. Maybe it does, maybe it doesn't. And I won't say anything about that one way or the other. I'll just assume for the moment that it does. And some of the theories from evolutionary psychology, I take it, are incompatible with Christian belief. For example, David Sloan Wilson's theory of the nature of religion is incompatible with Christian belief because it implies that the cognitive faculties or the sources of belief, the cognitive faculties that produce religious belief are not aimed at the truth. Rather, they're aimed at the production of behavior which is fitness maximizing. And that seems to me to be incompatible with Christian belief. So there is a conflict. Well, I say this conflict is superficial. Why do I say it's superficial? for the following reason. As all of you know, when you do science, you aren't supposed to use God in your theories or any other supernatural being. You can't explain something in science by proposing that God does it. Maybe Newton could get away with that. In the old days, he could say God periodically adjusts the orbits of the planets, but nowadays, that's not proper. That's not part of science. Nor can you use in science anything as evidence that you think you know or know by way of faith from the Bible, by way of revelation, or by way of faith from the Bible, for example. Can't do that. This sort of constraint on science is often called methodological naturalism. All right? Well, now suppose what we've got here in evolutionary psychology is a kind of science which, like with all science, is constrained by methodological naturalism. What does this mean? Well, what that means is that the scientific evidence base, what you can use as evidence in science or qua-scientist, is constrained by methodological naturalism. It can't contain anything you know, for example, from revelation. But the Christian's evidential base is broader than that. It includes all that's in the evidential base of science, and in addition, it contains whatever the Christian knows by way of revelation, that there is such a person as God, that God is a Trinity, that Jesus Christ came to redeem us by atoning for our sins and the like of that. So suppose it's true that from the limited perspective of methodological naturalism, the best way to think about human beings is evolutionary psychology and conflicts with Christian belief. That's perfectly compatible with Christian beliefs being true. If you start from only part of the totality of what you know, you may very well come up with some beliefs, some propositions might very well be probable with respect to that are in conflict with other things you know. So the Christian should say here, right, from the point of view of that limited scientific evidence base constrained by methodological naturalism, these evolutionary psychological theories are correct. That's right, but it doesn't follow, of course, that they are correct with respect to my entire evidential base, and I say they aren't. Okay, that's the conflict and the superficial conflict, as I say, between Christianity and science. What about what I said was the deep concord? Well, I'm running out of time, so I can't tell you. I'll just refer you to Bill Craig. Bill Craig already explained what some of this deep concord is. The Christianity with the claim that we human beings have been created in God's image and created in such a way, therefore, that we can know things about the world, makes a very nice home for science, and science, of course, grew up in the bosom of Christian theism. Now, turning to naturalism, first of all, the superficial concord. Richard Dawkins, as I quoted last night, says in a certain place that evolution makes it possible to be an intellectually fulfilled atheist because it gives a kind of answer to the question, how did all this plant and animal life get here? Where did it come from? It gives an answer to that question that prior to, say, Darwin, wasn't available to the naturalist. So there is a kind of superficial concord. There is deep conflict, though. And that was the lecture I gave last night. So I really can't, I've got right now about 35 seconds. I can't compress the whole lecture that took more than 35 minutes last night into 35 seconds. But the basic point is, if you accept naturalism and you also accept evolution, then the probability of your cognitive faculties being reliable will be low. In particular, the probability that the cognitive faculty that produces belief in naturalism, that's reliable, will be low, all right? Once you see that probability is low, then you have a defeater for the proposition that your cognitive faculties are reliable. That is to say, you have a reason for rejecting that proposition, that they're reliable. Once you have a defeater for that proposition, that your cognitive faculties are reliable, you have a defeater for any proposition that's produced by your cognitive faculties, including the conjunction of naturalism with evolution. So that conjunction produces a defeater for itself. It is therefore self-defeating. That means you can't sensibly believe the conjunction of naturalism with evolution. That means that naturalism conflicts with evolution. But evolution is an important, widely accepted, paradigmatic, contemporary scientific theory. Therefore, naturalism conflicts with science.